All right, welcome to Scale Up Soundbites, where we discuss bite-sized ideas to help you scale up your team and your career. I'm here with Micha Wotton, ex-CTO of a couple of pretty high-performing fintechs that have been out there, Pay, Doe, also been head of development and head of engineering in a couple of your roles before. Yeah. Micha's got a great skill set of developing high-performing engineering teams, which is what we're going to talk about here today, is how to create a high-performing engineering team and identify leaders from within. Micha, welcome to the show.
Thanks, mate. Good to be here.
Yeah,
pleasure.
Yeah, good to have you on board. It's great because, like, you know, I've spoken to you a few times about your career, seen you joining, those fintechs and stuff, and watch you grow. And it's always good to have people, on the couch here.
Yeah, it's good fun.
Nice.
Thanks for having me.
It's all right. All right, cool. Let's just jump straight in. So, look, what key strategies as leaders, or what key strategies can leaders use to effectively scale a technology team?
Yeah, as a leader, in order to scale, you've got to find other leaders. It's as simple as identifying the leadership traits in the people you've already got, and having particular traits that you're looking for. There's certain traits that I find are really key to building that high performance team. One of the main ones is humility, right? Like, one of the main things I look for in leaders is the ability to be humble and acknowledge that other people might know things that you don't. That's a key leadership trait. My attitude is that when I'm hiring, and I want this same attitude in my leaders. When we're hiring, we're always looking to find people who are smarter than us.
Yeah.
Because if I'm the cap, then we're in trouble. Right? So it's a matter of finding people who are really passionate about what they do. And a lot of this is going to sound trite and obvious, but there is a reality to it. Like, there are people like this, and this is what you need to find. You've got to find people who are passionate about what they do. And that doesn't necessarily mean the particular programming language that they're writing. It doesn't mean the databases that they're managing or designing. It doesn't mean the infrastructure that they're managing, provisioning, maintaining. What they're doing is actually solving problems within the org. And they've got to be passionate about getting things fixed or built in as good a way as possible. And something that's often forgotten by people who aren't engineers is that no engineer wants to build something badly. No engineer wants to do a bad job, right? So when we've got a group of engineers together, the leadership has got to be a facilitative role. It is not a dictatorial role. I like to say that the teams that I'm running are benevolent dictatorships, right? Because when the crunch arrives, someone's got to make a decision, and the leader's role is to make that decision.
So what do you mean by benevolent?
Benevolent means that I'm not going to be a dictator unless I absolutely have to.
Need to,
right? I'm not going to put my foot down. I'm happy to have the discussion. I want to hear people's opinions. I want to have that active discussion.
Yeah.
Being professional and respectful. But this is what I mean. You want to find people who are humble enough to know that other people know things they don't.
Yeah, sure.
The most experienced engineer in your team can learn something from the intern or the graduate who's just fresh out of uni, right? Everyone can learn from everyone else, and you've got to find engineers to get this high performance. You've got to find engineers who are also willing to teach. That being happy to share their hard-earned knowledge is another key part of building a high-performance team. Because in the end, there's multiple reasons why that's important, but in the end, you want people who are learning and learning from each other, challenging each other, and growing together. And that's how you build a close-knit team. That's how you come up with some of the best solutions. And so I feel like I'm kind of going all over the place a bit, so let's pull it back.
That's right.
Identifying those traits.
There's a lot of things there,
So humility is the first critical trait in anyone that you're thinking about putting in a leadership role. They've got to know what they know, but they've also got to be much more aware of what they don't know and be willing to learn from those around them, and also willing to admit they're wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's all too often people try to cover up for mistakes or find someone else to blame. But no, if you've made a mistake, we're all human. We all make mistakes. You come up to me and say, hey, I've screwed up, or hey, admit when you're wrong. You know what? I was saying we should do this thing. The team outvoted me. We did this other thing, and you know what? They were right.
Yeah.
That's an important part of being a leader. And that's how you get the best out of the people that you're working with, is by giving them the space to speak, and giving them the space to learn, and giving them the space to fail if necessary as well. We all grow and learn through making mistakes as well as learning from each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's where the humility is really key, because you're going to make mistakes. Be real enough to acknowledge them and own them and learn from them. And that's really one of the critical things for me. The other thing is the collaboration. I talked about being willing to learn from everyone and being willing to teach. But given enough space, and I know this is not always realistic, there's time pressures, there's budget pressures, there's all sorts of different tech debt will mean that you can't do things exactly the way you should be straight away. But the idea is that together we're going to talk about this, we're going to take the time to figure it out together, and then we're going to figure out where that milestone is, all get in alignment and move together towards that goal. And it's, it sounds trite, it sounds like a cliche, but it's actually really important. When having a discussion with an organisation or with a team within an organisation about how to build a solution, and this was particularly prevalent, at some of the agency style places that I've worked, where you're encountering a whole bunch of different technical problems all the time, and you're dealing with things in very quick succession. If you can have the discussion and about how to solve this problem, everyone's going to come in with their own history, their own experience, their own opinions, their own preferences.
Yeah.
But you've got a group of people who all have to work together on the same thing. And so having that discussion and working together to figure out what that solution looks like means that you're going to get better commitment from everyone in the team. And this is why trying to avoid being a dictator is also important, right? Because if you tell people, this is the tech we're going to use, this is how we're going to do it, if you tell the team and dictate to the team what it looks like, then they're going to be begrudging. If they think you've made a mistake, then they're going to be less engaged with the solution, and they're going to run into problems and go, hey, see, this is because we chose this solution rather than what I said we should use.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can have that discussion and basically get buy-in from everyone in the team, then they're all going to be committed to that solution. And when it doesn't work, they'll go, oh, yeah, okay, maybe we all collectively, none of us thought of that thing that has tripped us up or whatever it might be. Or none of us realised that this was going to be a problem. So there's that all comes about through having collaborative leaders and people who know how to guide a discussion, know how to facilitate a discussion in a respectful and professional, and it's another one of those cliches, a psychologically safe space.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You don't want to ridicule people. You never want people to feel like they should not be putting an idea forward because they're afraid of looking stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about building that culture in the team. And when you're growing a team, that starts with the core leadership. You've got to find people who have that already in the team. You've got to find people who have that potential as well and foster it. And you've got to, lead through example. You've got to make sure that when you are having that discussion, when you're leading the discussion with your leaders, that you do it the same way.
Yep.
And it's funny because so much of high performance engineering and really capable engineering is not about just the technical capabilities of the team members. It's a lot about the way that the team works together. Mm. And if you build that in your engineering teams, they will naturally do that with other teams in the business, right? all too often, you've got product team members, you've got engineering team members, and I've seen it all too often that product and engineering are at loggerheads.
Yeah,
right?
it's a
product
classic
like,
cliche,
we
right?
have to do this. Why aren't you doing this? No, and before pay was a really great example of having the two working together really well, and that was not. I'm not taking any of the credit for that. I came in and I found that culture was already there, which made my job much more straightforward when it came to making sure that the product was getting built properly.
Sure.
And it's that if you're engendering that culture of collaboration and respectful professional discussion and working together in good faith, when the engineering team talk to the product team, they will naturally take that approach, or more often naturally take that approach. Excuse me. And that's where you get a really effective cross-department discussion. It doesn't matter whether it's compliance team, it doesn't matter if it's the security team, it doesn't matter which other department they're working with. We have to have that same approach. We have to have that. We're all working together here. No one's trying to undercut someone, or there's no winner and loser here. We either all win together or we all lose together, and that's kind of how you have to really encourage and foster and guide the team in behaviour. Of course, having very technically competent engineers is also key.
Yeah, sure.
But the challenge that I find with excuse me.
Yeah.
The challenge that I find when looking for really exceptional engineers is that there's a couple of things that you build in that you have to take into account. By having, you can't build a full team of rock stars, right? By having rock stars, you're going to do you risk doing a couple of things. First is the key person risk. Right? What if that rock star leaves? What if that person that is just head and shoulders above all of the other team as far as output, productivity, all of that sort of stuff? If they leave, you've got a bigger gap. But the other challenge is that it's rare to find people who are that technically gifted, but also have the soft skills and the collaborative approach. That's often through them learning through experience that other people can't necessarily keep up or can't necessarily see things with the clarity that they do. And so you've got to work extra hard with those team members to make sure that they are open and they are actively, discussing in a respectful manner with the rest of the team. This is not saying that you shouldn't seek those people. Just be aware that they do come with caveats, right? I've known some really exceptional engineers who have the full package, and they are everyone around them, everyone in the team benefits.
Yeah, sure.
When you've got someone like that who is that good at what they do and is also really willing to share, that lifts the whole team. And it can make a huge difference, but it can also make, if they don't have those softer skills, it can also make a huge negative difference in the long run.
Yeah.
So you just got to be really mindful and pragmatic. You've got to be pragmatic about it all. You've got to be pragmatic about the solutions you build. You can't always build it the perfect way the first time, particularly if you're coming into a situation where there's a lot of tech debt. So that's, for me, building a high-performing team starts with those leadership traits.
Yeah, to go back to him as well, where I think you said was humility, the ability to be collaborative, and the second one. And then fostering that environment within your team. And this, I think you touched on psychological safety, which is a big one that I think a lot of people that we speak about talk about. But humility is also another one as well. That sort of comes up. It's funny what you mentioned about the rock stars. I immediately went back to like Miami Heat when they had LeBron, Wade, and I can't even remember the other guy's name, but it was like 3 super rock stars, but each of them trying to outdo each other, and it just didn't work. They always fell down at the final hurdle until one of them sort of took. So I think Wade took a step back to let LeBron take it, and it was like managing that sort of ego sort of thing. But
That's
it took a while for it to happen.
Yeah.
But
well, that's the thing with really exceptional skill often does come ego.
Yeah.
Not always, but you can also work with, like, if you've got someone like that in your team, you can work with them. You can talk about and develop those soft skills in people. It takes more time from you, but it's worth doing. If you can get someone with that technical capability, with that, actual extraordinary talent, and have them uplifting the rest of the team, then you've got, a great position.
Yeah, I'm reading the Netflix culture book, and they talk specifically about what you just mentioned there in terms of having those people. They call it culture density.
Yeah.
And they talk about how the big one was the opposite, where they had one or two people that would just bring down the team. There's an interesting study by the University of New South Wales that they mentioned in the book about just having one bad egg can actually just bring down the team.
Yeah.
No matter how many people you have, just one bad person. And if they act lazy or if they act spiteful or bring that ego into it, it will just bring down the team. Like, it just happens. But the opposite is also true. If you just have that one person doing the other thing, it can bring up and have that culture density.
Yeah, and you've got to, if you find that person, you've got to ideally find them a role where that capability and that attitude touches more people.
Yeah.
It impacts more people. So if they're in an isolated team and that team, they're not as engaged across the larger department, it can often be worth actually either promoting them into a position where they're actually looking after more, or moving them into an area where they're involved with more people, and just spreading that attitude and spreading that culture.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got to do all of it very sensitively. And you've touched on a really important part of this is when you do have people when you inherit or when you discover that someone that you've brought in has a negative effect on the culture, how do you deal with it? How do you manage it? And this is an area that I personally think that I can grow in, is how do I actually manage that when you've got that negative culture and that negative personality in the team. There's various different ways you could, work with them, mentor them, or get them a mentor that they are willing to work with on the softer skills. But the first thing you've got to be careful to do is you've got to make them realise that they need to change.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's the first thing. You've got to make them realise that they need to change. And I'm not going to tell anyone how they should do that. Sometimes it's much more straightforward to kind of manage them out, or actually go down the route of performance management, because in every engineering job description, there should be something about working with the team.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah.
There should be something about work with product managers. There should be something about working with
so
QA.
not just the immediate team, but the wider...
Well, yeah, but in your JDs, even for your junior engineers, they're not just going to be talking to junior engineers, to other engineers.
Absolutely.
They're going to be talking to QA. They're going to be talking to customer support. They're going to be talking to other people within the org. And so you should have in your JD something about, working how you want them to work with those other people. That way, if you need to performance manage someone, you can say, hey, you're doing really well in these areas, but this area we need to manage, we need to work on. If you don't see that, we're going to have a problem. Okay, so here's why. Once again, it's always a really good, you've got to take everything as a good faith discussion. You've got to approach everything in good faith. You've got to say, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate what you bring. However, I've noticed, if you have people complaining or whatever, you be sensitive. But that's an important part of actually building that team, that culture, is identifying those that are blockers to building the culture that you want.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think they touch upon, this is in the actual Netflix book as well, is they really struggled with that, and then really digging deep about what it is that they wanted to be communicating with their employees when they're having these conversations. And they flipped back and forth, but what was interesting was they came to the idea of it just being pretty simple: is what that person is doing benefiting the organisation as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely.
And And that's what all the drill down to. So if they're not collaborating for whatever it is, that's not benefiting the organisation. It may be benefiting them because they're able to do their work, but they're not benefiting. So that's where they sort of drew the line. I was like, okay, cool, we need to have that discussion.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. So we touched on humility, collaboration, and these are all potential traits to identify leaders. Is there anything else?
I mean, there's got to be expertise, right?
Yeah, sure.
That doesn't always mean really strong technical expertise. Usually it does in an engineering department, usually, right? But it may be that there's a leader has particular expertise in project management or product management, something like that.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a level of expertise. They've got to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Yep.
There's always got to be some level of technical capability. But when someone is a leader, you've got to remember that technical capability goes from being 80% of what they do to 30 to 40, potentially.
Yeah, and even less.
And even less, depending on what level they're at and what the structure looks like. And so my challenge personally is how do I avoid becoming a formally technical manager?
Yeah.
Like how do I maintain my own technical capability? How do I maintain my own knowledge? And it's tech, right? There's always new tech. There's always stuff to learn. You've just got to be passionate about that. Excuse me. And it will follow. That's it. The humility, the collaboration, and the technical capability. They don't have to be the best at it, but they have to know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the three things there was humility, collaboration, and some sort of technical expertise, or expertise in some sort of manner.
Yeah. But I mean, humility and collaboration are key traits. They've got to be able to lead. They've got to be able to inspire.
Yeah.
And they've also got to be able to have hard conversations.
That's a good word. Inspire. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
then have that side conversation.
Yeah, but often the inspiration comes from being humble and collaborating. Right? Like people want to work with leaders who bring the best out in them. People want to work with and do their best for people who encourage them and see them as individuals and work with them to help them grow.
Yep.
Think about the best people, the best managers that you've worked with. They weren't necessarily the most technically gifted or most amazing at anything other than bringing the best out of you.
Yeah. I think for me personally, if that way it was talking about what you were talking about is providing that safety for me to be me and grow at probably at a pace that was slightly higher than what I would normally do myself, but not too much higher. So identifying, it's kind of like, find
stretch
that
without breaking.
But that sweet spot and giving me that. So just so I was always constantly pushing forward, by giving me that safety and making me feel safe. And that was basically it, coming down to it. But the other thing, the flip side of it is that I wanted to be in that position. So like I think if you're identifying teams, you really got to establish that why of why they're there in the first place. I feel anyway. Okay, cool. How do you foster an environment that inspires leaders to emerge?
That's a great question. So you're always battling against the 80-20 rule, right? Like 80% of the work gets done by 20% of the people. And you're always finding that people who are effective at getting stuff done get overloaded because people give them more work, right? That is probably counterproductive when you're trying to fund leaders, because just because someone is good at getting the work done and is good at, is really productive doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a good leader. They're very different skill sets, right? They can be leads, but not necessarily leaders. They can be a technical lead. They can lead the initiative in a particular technical skill. But they're not necessarily people leaders.
You find a lot of
the and they're both really critical roles. You've got to have those people who are technically excellent. You've got to have people who have a lot of expertise, but they're not always the people that you want leading absolute pure gold when you find someone like that. But how do you foster an environment? It really comes down, it starts with psychologically safe space.
Yeah.
Right? It really does. You've got to make sure that people feel free to speak up regardless of what it is they have to say.
Yeah.
And that cuts both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So often that means stopping someone from talking a certain way
Mm-hmm.
because what they are saying is making it less psychologically safe for everyone else in that team.
Yeah.
So whether you pull them aside afterwards or you gently demonstrate, hang on, don't, he just made a suggestion.
Yeah.
Don't make fun of him for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We want people to bring their
exactly.
suggestions forward. And sometimes it can be productive to say that in front of the group.
Yeah.
One thing that's really important in teams of all sizes is that people see that working hard and doing well is rewarded, but also not working hard and not carrying your weight is the opposite of rewarded, right? Like it's dealt with.
Yeah.
So if there are people in the team that are negative, if there are people in the team that are just lazy, if there are people in the team that never take responsibility, the rest of the team is going to suffer if you don't deal with that.
Sure.
The culture in the team is going to suffer if you don't deal with that. They've got to see that underperformance is dealt with and managed. How do you do that in a way that doesn't threaten people?
Yeah. Yep.
Right? If they see that people it seems arbitrarily cut off and just turfed, it can be really tough to manage morale within the rest of the team. But at the same time, often when you're in that environment, there's one or two or three other people that are kind of aware that this person's not pulling their weight and they're just either passing the buck or actually not getting stuff done. The rest of the team is unaware, right? So how do you deal with that and manage that in a way? I don't have the full answer, but it's something that I've had to deal with a number of times. But that is both dealing with both the positive and the negative is critical to fostering this environment. As far as the best way to foster this kind of environment is to lead by example.
Yep.
Demonstrate the culture that you want in the team. That's why humility and collaboration are key traits, right? Because without those in your leaders, you're not going to get that in the team members. And so by whether it's to my benefit or not, I'm very transparent. Sometimes maybe I'm too transparent.
Sure.
But that's something I've personally got to learn and figure out. But leading by example and that open nature, that humble nature, that collaborative nature is really the simplest way to build that environment. The other part then is part of hiring. When you're hiring people, what are you looking for? Personally, a number of times I've found that technical tests or technical components of a hiring process can be either counterproductive or misleading.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So
there's also going to
I generally,
if you're in a diverse team. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can talk about how they have an inherent bias.
Yeah, 100%.
That undercut the diversity initiatives that they're pushing. Right. So that's another reason why technical tests or take-home technical tests are a problem. One thing that I've done most recently, and we weren't doing a whole bunch of hiring, but it is quite effective, is rather because you do want to check the technical capabilities of this person that you're looking at bringing into the team.
It's a new role.
Of course, it's going to be 75% plus of what they're here to do. So yes, you've got to get those cultural pieces right, but you've also got to make sure they know what they're doing. And there are ways to do that without giving them some online test that they have to do at home or giving them some challenge that they have to bring.
Yeah, sure.
What I find particularly effective is what you want to do is you want to hire for people who don't just interview well, but they do the job well. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
Right? So reproducing the kind of thing that's going to happen in the workplace is a good way. How do you do that in the interview process? one way that I've found works is you have a technical question or something that you want to discuss in the technical interview. You don't get them to do any work, but you give it to them the day before, so they're not coming in cold. Right? No challenge in the workplace do you have to come up with all of the answers in 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
You've always got time to go away and think about it. So how do we reproduce that? Don't give it to them a week before, because life goes on. But give it to them the day before. They can spend a bit of time doing a little bit of research. They can think about it overnight, and then when you have the discussion with them the next day, you work through the problem. The problem that you're working through will vary based on the role that you're discussing. If it's a back-end role, then maybe you've got some manufacture some API challenge that they've got to come up with, help work out. Maybe versioning of an API is something that's a tech debt issue that you've got. So build a technical question or a technical discussion around that.
Yep.
If it's a mobile role, then pick something that is actually going to be the sort of thing they'll encounter in the role.
Yep.
And that way, you're not asking them to invest any time. You're not demanding an investment from them before you are willing to invest in them.
Yeah, sure.
And that's the challenge with take-home challenges.
Yeah.
You are requiring your candidates to invest in your organisation before you have demonstrated the willingness to invest in them.
Yeah.
And you start from an unbalanced position. And also, it's coding challenges in particular, unless you are hiring for an entry level and you're looking to make sure that people earned that degree that they've just come out of uni with, coding is only a very small part of what an engineer will do. Right? It's the key part.
Yeah.
Like, nothing else that they do means anything if they can't code, but it's only a very small part of what they actually do as an engineer. The rest of it's debugging, the rest of it is architecting, the rest of it is refactoring. Hang on, should we actually structure this piece of code or this module a different way? Or we've got this piece of functionality in multiple different places. Surely we can consolidate so that every time it changes, we don't have to do it in 3 places. Those are the sorts of challenges. Watching them write code on some online platform for 2 hours doesn't give you the insight that you need to know whether they can do all of those other pieces well.
Yeah, sure.
So that's kind of where I've arrived at personally.
Yeah.
It's been effective, and it also, the really interesting thing is when you set up the discussion as part of the hiring process, then you can check for the collaboration and the humility at the same time. Because it's not just the leaders that need that. That's the culture that you're engendering. It's key that the leaders have that. But you do want that from everyone in the org. You don't want to bring in egos. You want to bring in skill, but you want to bring... someone else coined the phrase, I don't know where I heard it, but I love it. You want people who have strong opinions, but loosely held. This is the way I would do it. This is what I think. This is my opinion. But you can readily convince me otherwise. I'm willing to change my mind in the light of new evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, a good friend of mine, I've had him on the couch before, but Paul Nate says when he interviews people, he's a principal engineer for a mobile team. When he interviews people, he asks the question of, probably shouldn't throw this, but what is the role of the software engineer? And what they're looking for is similar to what you just touched on, but is they solve problems.
Yeah.
And it's having to do it with the tools of coding.
Exactly.
But I might not need to.
Yep.
If you want to build something that I've already built, I'll put you in the right direction to do that.
Exactly.
Or I'll put in, so that was the ability to do it, and then asking those questions to dig deep on what that actual problem is that they're trying to solve.
Absolutely.
As well. Yeah.
I mean, the ability to solve problems is not, or the need to solve problems is not just the engineers in the team. The leaders in the team also have to be solving problems.
So there's a cultural.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's just the nature of the problems changes as you go up through the ranks.
I mean, you've got that synergy of product, leadership,
Yep.
engineering, all working together. Your product essentially in its evolution will start, right? It's going to change, it's going to pivot depending on what customer needs are. And if you've got the cohesion, it should work properly.
Yeah.
Easy thing to do in theory, hard in reality.
Very true.
Yeah. It's funny, you said something at the start, it was like hire people that are smart in themselves. It's like, whatever has heard that before. And it's like, it's a Steve Jobs quote, I remember, when they were first Apple.
Well,
We're always right people smarter than us. And exactly the same, because if I'm the smartest person in the room, we're in a very, very
maybe that's where I heard it.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's definitely not something I came up with. So, but I don't remember hearing where I heard it.
It's a good, you're always growing as a business, aren't you?
Exactly. And I want to learn from the people I'm hiring as well.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's part of the humility, is always seeking to learn from the people around you.
Yeah, and that's one of the values we've got here. Plug and scale, and we do it's a little play on words with the whole CI/CD environment, but it's like CI, CL. Like we're continuously improving, continuously learning.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great.
This is great. Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks so much for touching on those topics about building a team, looking at the leadership, leadership characteristics of people, and how to promote that and foster is such a good thing. I think, we talked about a few books in the chat, but I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I ask everyone here.
Sure.
What would be your favourite book from a leadership perspective that you're sort of drawn down on?
There's a couple. In my recent career, the one that's probably helped me the most would be blitzscaling.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, it's
Do you know who that's
Reid Hoffman.
Oh, it's Reid? Yeah.
The other one that's really important, regardless of the size, is the lean startup.
Yeah,
Like
sure.
the cycle.
Mhm.
That's
Eric
Ries.
Ries, yeah.
And what I find is that approach, while he's targeting the startups, that approach is fundamental to improvement in engineering in every organisation.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Like that's why I find that most valuable. Neither of those is necessarily, well, actually, no, they're both applicable leadership approaches, right? Like as leaders, you have the ability to implement some of these things from both the blitzscaling and the lean style.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it. Who is the most influential person in your career and why, or has been?
This is going to sound really trite. It would be my dad.
Oh yeah? Fair enough. Yeah.
So my father was a carpenter, and he taught me a lot of really key principles that are applicable regardless of what you're building. But then he had to shift into tech for health reasons. But within 10 years, he'd gone from a novice computer programmer to one of IBM's security experts in the APAC region.
Wow.
Back in the 90s. And some of the things that he taught me, the value of humility and collaboration, just even in the relationship that we had. But, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
Right? Take the time to do the extra check before you make that change.
Such a great
And the other one that I use all the time is use the right tool for the job. The difference between novice carpenters and professionals is that the professionals know which tool to use.
I would.
And so those two things, from a technical perspective, they are things that are applicable everywhere.
Yeah.
And my father was the epitome of humility and yet technical, challenging himself to be technically excellent all the time.
That would be such a, pivotal and rewarding experience to see your dad go from being a carpenter to a software engineer and then grow.
I mean, I was still in my teens, right, when that happened. But it was because of that I ended up in software and computers, because I probably would have ended up in some chemical engineering or some other engineering discipline if there hadn't been the exposure to what he was doing. Back in the early 90s, Linux was coming out and he was just trying all the different flavors of, I think Slackware was the first one that he tried back then. He was an AIX Unix specialist for IBM, but the open source he really loved.
Yeah, well.
So it was, it was good.
Habit.
Yeah.
What habits do you do that you contribute to your success as a technical leader?
This is the problem for me, is that the habits that I have are intrinsic and I haven't necessarily. Give me a second to think about them.
Yeah, that's all right.
What habits? I think one of the most important habits is constantly reevaluating what I've just done.
Yeah.
Whether this is different from second guessing.
Yeah.
This is reevaluating whether it's a conversation I've just had, replaying it in my head, and how could I have done better in that.
Sure.
I guess it's the habit of continuous self-evaluation.
Great.
Um,
Fantastic.
and we don't always have the luxury of evaluating everything we do, right?
Yeah.
How many times any engineer who's listening to this or watching this will know with the painful experience of reviewing your own code from 6 months ago, right? You've learned a lot in 6 months, and you look at it and you go, what was I thinking? But that's a key part of self-improvement. And it's that habit of just reevaluating something that you've done, not to go over old ground, but this is how you continuously challenge yourself. The other habit that I've recommend or that I've found really valuable is taking time to learn about texts that don't relate directly to what you're doing today.
Okay, great idea.
Right.
Yeah.
So I read an article years and years ago about how to level up as a software engineer.
Okay.
And one of the key things that I took away from that article was go and learn a language, a programming language that has nothing to do with and is completely different from the language that you use in your job day to day.
Sure.
It does a couple of things. Excuse me. It gives you a perspective on what you are working with that you wouldn't necessarily have, because you learn how a different language does things, structures and patterns within a different language that are not necessarily there in the language you're using. And I don't want to limit it to just languages, because it could be that it's DevOps, right? You're a software engineer, you don't have to do DevOps, but go and learn about it, because it will make you better at the job you do.
Yeah.
If you have a better understanding of where your code runs and the constraints under which it runs, it gives you the ability to write better code, because you're more aware of the challenges that doing it a certain way presents.
Yeah.
So it
gives you a new perspective as well, and it gives you that further understanding of how what you're doing is impacting in that software development lifecycle, where it's going if you're doing something like that.
You have to balance it, right? Because you risk becoming a jack of all trades and master of none. But if you do it right, then going and learning all of these different diverse areas, like if you're working in,
I don't think so. Yeah.
So it doesn't work if you're working in Java developer, or you're working with anything that's real time, not real time. What I'm trying to say is go and learn some real time OS type stuff. Where I'm not talking about real time rendering, I'm talking about something where the timing of an assessment or a particular event is absolutely critical down to the millisecond, whether it's industrial sensors, even things like, if you want to get into it as a hobby, like the whole Arduino and the whole microprocessor robotics environment. It's actually really useful to understand timing constraints, race conditions, all of these things that may impact. May make you better at what you're doing in your day to day. But it also, generally people in engineering don't need a lot of encouragement, because they're passionate about tech and they go and do this stuff anyway.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But taking time to actually go and explore these other things and putting time aside to go and explore these other things is actually important for personal and professional growth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Really good. Cool. Hey, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great. It's such good takeaways there.
Yeah. Look, just to be, a lot of what I'm saying is none of this is new. Right? This is just stuff I've collected over the years and kind of put together into how I want to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that humility coming through, which I like.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sam. Pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.